There are lives that seem to belong to fairy tales, filled with palaces, jewels, magnificent parties, and royal ceremonies. And then there are the lives behind the fairy tale, the lives of people who, despite privilege and fame, still experience love, heartbreak, loneliness, disappointment, and the search for happiness. The life of Princess Margaret was one of those lives. Born on August 21, 1930, Princess Margaret Rose was the second daughter of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, later known as the Queen Mother. She was 4 years younger than her sister, Princess Elizabeth, who would one day become Queen Elizabeth II. Margaret grew up in a world that was both privileged and intensely controlled. As a young princess, she lived with her family in royal residences, surrounded by ceremony and tradition. Yet her childhood was not entirely sheltered. During the Second World War, Margaret and Elizabeth remained in Britain while the country faced the dangers of bombing and uncertainty. The sisters became remarkably close, and their bond would remain important throughout their lives. Elizabeth was the responsible one, the future queen, trained from childhood for duty. Margaret was different. She was lively, confident, glamorous, witty, and independent-minded. She loved music, dancing, fashion, parties, and the excitement of social life. As she grew older, Margaret became one of the most photographed young women in the world. She possessed the kind of beauty and charisma that captured public attention wherever she went. Her fashionable clothes, elegant appearance, and lively personality made her a celebrity long before the modern age of social media. Photographers followed her, newspapers reported on her friendships, and the public became fascinated by her personal life. But behind the glamour was a young woman who wanted something very simple: to fall in love and choose her own life. In the early 1950s, Margaret fell deeply in love with Group Captain Peter Townsend, a Royal Air Force officer who had served as an equerry to her father. Townsend was older than Margaret and, importantly, was divorced. In today's world, that might seem like a private matter. But in the Britain of the 1950s, a marriage between a member of the royal family and a divorced person was surrounded by enormous controversy. Margaret was also sister to the newly crowned Queen Elizabeth II, and her marriage could have created a constitutional and political crisis. The couple loved each other, but their relationship was placed under extraordinary pressure. For a time, Margaret appeared determined to marry Townsend. Yet eventually, in 1955, she announced that they would not marry. Her statement expressed her decision to put aside her wish for marriage because of her responsibilities to the Commonwealth and the Church. It was one of the great emotional dramas of her life. The woman who seemed to have everything had been unable to marry the man she loved. Margaret eventually found love again with photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones. They married in 1960 in a spectacular ceremony at Westminster Abbey. It was the first royal wedding to be televised, and millions of people around the world watched. The marriage seemed, at first, like a new beginning. In 1961, Margaret became a mother when her son, David, was born. A daughter, Sarah, followed in 1964. For a while, Margaret seemed to have created the family life she had wanted. But beneath the surface, her marriage became increasingly difficult. Margaret and Anthony were very different people, and both had strong personalities. Their relationship eventually deteriorated. Their lives became complicated by long periods apart, intense public attention, and relationships outside the marriage. In 1978, they divorced. It was a remarkable moment because royal divorce was still unusual and deeply scrutinized. Margaret had once been expected to represent a perfect royal image. Instead, her life showed the public that even a princess could experience the painful reality of a broken marriage. After her divorce, Margaret continued to live a glamorous and active life. She traveled, attended cultural events, supported charities, and remained an important member of the royal family. She was also known for her love of the arts. She enjoyed ballet, music, theater, and literature, and she supported numerous artistic and charitable organizations. Her social life became legendary. Margaret attended parties with artists, actors, musicians, writers, and other famous figures. She became associated with the glamorous world of London in the 1960s and 1970s. Stories about her sharp wit, strong opinions, late nights, and unforgettable personality became part of her public image. Yet fame came with a price. Margaret's every decision was examined by newspapers. Her friendships were reported. Her romances became public property. Even ordinary mistakes could become national news. She was born into privilege, but she was never free from the expectations that came with being royal. Her relationship with her sister, Queen Elizabeth II, was also complicated in the way that many close family relationships can be. Elizabeth carried the enormous responsibility of being monarch, while Margaret lived in the shadow of the crown but was not herself the sovereign. The sisters loved each other, but they lived very different lives. Elizabeth's life was defined by duty. Margaret's was defined by the struggle between duty and freedom. As Margaret grew older, the glamorous image began to fade. Her health suffered, and she experienced a series of strokes. She gradually withdrew from public life. Still, there were moments of warmth and happiness. She remained close to her children and grandchildren, and she continued to enjoy the arts and the beautiful surroundings of her homes. At times, the public glimpsed the more private Margaret, a woman with a mischievous sense of humor, a deep love of music, and a fierce loyalty to those close to her. Princess Margaret died on February 9, 2002, at the age of 71, following a stroke. Her death came only a few weeks before that of her mother, the Queen Mother. With Margaret's passing, the world lost one of the most fascinating figures of 20th century British royalty. She was never destined to be queen. She did not have the same public role as her sister. And perhaps that was precisely what made her story so compelling. Princess Margaret's life was a contradiction. She was surrounded by wealth, yet experienced heartbreak. She was famous, yet often struggled to escape the attention of the public. She was a princess, yet wanted the freedom to make her own choices. She lived in palaces, but faced the same emotions that exist in ordinary human lives: the excitement of falling in love, the pain of losing someone, the difficulty of marriage, the joy of motherhood, and the loneliness that can sometimes accompany fame. Perhaps the most beautiful way to remember Princess Margaret is not simply as the glamorous younger sister of a queen. Remember her as a woman who tried to find her own place in a world that had already decided who she was supposed to be. She laughed loudly. She loved passionately. She made mistakes. She experienced disappointment. She enjoyed beauty and friendship. And, like all of us, she searched for happiness. Her life reminds us that a crown, or even a place inside a palace, cannot protect a person from the deepest human emotions. Princess Margaret's story was not a perfect fairy tale. It was something more real. It was a story of love and loss, privilege and restriction, glamour and loneliness, duty and freedom. And perhaps that is why, decades after her greatest dramas, people still remember her. Because behind the royal title was simply Margaret, a woman trying to live, love, and find happiness in a life that belonged partly to herself and partly to the crown.